Neftali, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, holds a mystery that few have come to understand. How did a land marked by oblivion and darkness become the stage where the greatest light in history shone with splendor? This is not just another story of genealogies and territories. It is the account of a tribe destined to change the course of humanity through the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. Today, we will unravel the enigma of Neftali, a tribe that symbolizes speed, freedom, and inspiring words. Its legacy is astonishingly intertwined with the ministry of Jesus in Galilee, a key region in the divine plan of redemption. You will be amazed to discover how every seemingly incidental detail fits perfectly within a heavenly design that continues to transform lives to this day. If you are ready to dive into one of the most fascinating chapters of Scripture, subscribe now and don't miss content like this. In the end, share this video with someone who needs to know the eternal impact of this incredible story. Let's begin. In the vast and arid lands of Canaan, Jacob's camp was a scene of tensions, dreams, and a divided family. Among tents and flocks, two women stood as key figures in Israel's history, Leah and Rachel. Sisters united by blood but separated by jealousy, they starred in one of the most intense rivalries in Scripture. In the midst of this struggle for love and recognition, a third figure emerged, silent but crucial: Bilhah, Rachel's faithful servant. Bilhah had been given to Rachel by her father, Laban, as part of her marriage to Jacob. In that culture, servant women were not mere maids. Their destinies were intrinsically tied to those of their mistresses. Bilhah witnessed Rachel's pain as she silently suffered, watching her sister bear child after child for Jacob while she remained barren. Each cry of childbirth from Leah's tent was a dagger in Rachel's heart, a cruel reminder of what she could not give an heir. Finally, consumed by desperation, she made a decision that would change the course of history. Jacob, with the weight of sorrow reflected on his face, heard her say, "Here is my servant Bilhah. Go into her. Perhaps through her, I will build my family." This act, more than a desperate woman's decision, was a reflection of the customs of the time. The children of a servant would be considered legitimate offspring of her mistress, and Rachel was willing to do whatever was necessary not to be left behind in her silent struggle against Leah. Jacob, accustomed to the demands of his wives, agreed. Bilhah, a woman without voice or choice, became the instrument of a greater design. In time, the camp witnessed an event that would be inscribed in history. Bilhah became pregnant. Though the child was not biologically Rachel's, she claimed him with pride and joy. When he was finally born, she held him in her arms and exclaimed, "With great struggles I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed." Thus, she named him Neftali, meaning my struggle. But the birth of Neftali was much more than the result of a rivalry between sisters. From the beginning, his name carried a prophetic weight. He was not just a child, he was the reflection of a constant struggle between love, jealousy, and faith. His existence would be part of a divine tapestry that was yet to be revealed. As he grew, Neftali witnessed and became part of a complex family dynamic. The sixth son of Jacob, the second born of a servant, his life was marked by struggle and redemption. But the most astonishing thing is how this child, born out of struggle and desperation, would become part of the stage where prophecy would find its fulfillment. And this story is just beginning. For Jacob, every child was a blessing, but the way they came into the world set them apart deeply. Leah saw the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, the other servant who also bore children for Jacob, as rivals to her own, while Rachel considered them an extension of her frustrated motherhood. But how would this affect little Neftali? From his birth, his life was shaped by the expectations of others. As the son of a servant, He could have been considered insignificant within the family narrative, but in the divine plan, every detail has a purpose. Neftali would grow to hold a significant place in the history of Israel, demonstrating that even in the midst of chaos, God's purpose always prevails. The first chapter of his life not only tells us about his birth, but also invites us to reflect on the internal struggles we all face: rivalry, the longing for acceptance, and the search for a greater purpose. Now I want to hear your opinion. Do you think that internal struggles like Rachel's can be the driving force behind great purposes? Leave your comment and share your thoughts. Your perspective could enrich this story in unexpected ways. Neftali's childhood unfolded in an environment of constant movement, amid the sound of flocks and the bustle of Jacob's nomadic camp. Living in a camp meant learning to adapt quickly to circumstances. Neftali, like his brothers, grew up among tents, dust, and starry skies. But beyond the hardships of desert life, what truly marked his childhood were the stories and teachings passed down by his father, Jacob. From a very young age, Neftali displayed a restless spirit, always moving swiftly between the tents, exploring beyond the boundaries of the camp. His mother, Bilhah, watched him with a mix of pride and concern as he ran across the nearby hills, showing impressive speed even for his young age. That speed, she thought, was a sign that her son was destined for something greater, something they could not yet understand. In the camp, Neftali forged a special bond with Dan, his maternal brother. Though their personalities were different, sharing the same status within the family united them deeply. While other brothers were divided between the sons of Leah and Rachel, Neftali and Dan learned to rely on each other. Dan, more reserved and thoughtful, admired Neftali's quick thinking and action. His brother had a special gift for finding creative solutions to the camp's daily problems, gathering scattered lambs, finding water in seemingly dry lands, or mediating small conflicts between siblings. But childhood in the camp was not just games and adventures. The nights were sacred moments when Jacob gathered his sons to tell them stories of his life and of the God who had guided him through countless trials. Neftali listened intently to each account: Jacob's escape from his brother Esau, the long years of labor for Rachel, and above all, the encounter at Peniel where he wrestled with an angel and received a new name, Israel. "We are the people of the covenant," Jacob declared with a firm and reverent voice. "God has promised to bless us and make us a great nation. Each of you has a role in this divine plan." These words were engraved in Neftali's heart. Though he was still too young to fully understand their meaning, something within him resonated with the idea of being part of a greater destiny. Many nights, after hearing his father's stories, Neftali would walk away from the camp to gaze at the stars, wondering how he, a child born from his mother's struggle, could contribute to God's great plan. Over time, the first signs of his character began to emerge. Neftali was not only fast and agile, but also strategic in his thinking. When the camp's shepherds faced problems with the flocks, he always found a way to help. He was loyal to his family, especially to Dan, but he also showed a surprising ability to be impartial, wisely mediating disagreements among his brothers. Unknowingly, Neftali was already being shaped for a future where his name, meaning, and legacy would take on a far greater significance. However, life in Jacob's camp was not easy. The tensions between Leah and Rachel did not only affect the wives, but extended to their children. Leah's descendants, as the firstborn, imposed their authority over the others, while the children of Rachel and her servants were pushed into the background. In this hostile environment, Neftali felt the need to prove his worth, not with words, but with actions. Every day he strove to learn, to work harder, to show that beyond his origins, he had a place in the family, and in God's purpose. As he grew, his speed and agility became unmatched. He was no longer just the swift child of the camp, but the young man who traveled great distances to deliver messages between the shepherds or find lost flocks before nightfall. His physical skill was impressive, but what truly set him apart was his ability to inspire trust in those around him. One night, as Jacob recounted his struggle with the angel, Neftali dared to ask, "Father, why did you fight with God? Had he not already given you everything you needed?" Jacob, with a smile full of wisdom, replied, "Because in the struggle we discover who we are. God does not give us everything easily. He shapes us through our trials. You too will have your own battles, Neftali, but remember, no matter how difficult they may seem, trust in His purpose." These words were engraved in his heart. He then understood that his name, My Struggle, was not a burden but an invitation to perseverance and unwavering faith in God's plans. A day that began like any other in Jacob's camp soon turned into a dark chapter in his family's history. The brothers were scattered across the pastures, tending the flocks, when the figure of Joseph appeared in the distance. He walked with confidence, his multicolored tunic flowing in the wind, a visible reminder of their father's favoritism. Joseph had always been different, not only because of Jacob's special treatment, but also because of the dreams he eagerly shared. He spoke of visions in which his brothers bowed before him, stories that fueled the anger and resentment of the older ones. Neftali listened with curiosity, recognizing in him a connection with the divine, but also understanding that those words only intensified the conflict. As Joseph approached, Judah muttered something under his breath. Simeon and Levi exchanged knowing glances. Soon, a dangerous idea began to take root to get rid of Joseph. Neftali, always more observant than impulsive, felt a chill run down his spine. He did not share the same hatred as his brothers, but he understood their frustration. He found himself caught in a moral dilemma. He did not have the authority of Reuben, who tried to mediate and protect Joseph, nor the calculated coldness of Judah, who saw in the situation an opportunity for profit. He was caught in between, torn between loyalty to his family and the certainty that what they were about to do was wrong. The brothers seized Joseph and tore off his tunic. Neftali did not raise his voice. His speed, which had so often served to help and solve problems, betrayed him at that moment. He could have run to warn his father, but he did not. He remained there, motionless, watching as they threw him into an empty pit. The image of Joseph pleading from the bottom of the pit was etched into his memory, and when the caravan of Ishmaelites appeared on the horizon, he heard Judah's voice with a tone of cold logic. "What do we gain by killing him? Let's sell him. That way his blood will not be on our hands." Blinded by envy, the brothers agreed without hesitation. Neftali, still silent, became an accomplice through his inaction. The sale of Joseph marked a turning point in his life. His spirit, always agile and free, became weighed down by guilt. And for the first time, his speed was not enough to escape the weight of his choices. When the brothers returned to the camp, they carried with them the multicolored tunic, now soaked in the blood of a young goat. They placed it before Jacob without saying a word. But the heart of the old patriarch shattered in an instant. Seeing that garment, he collapsed with a strangled cry, convinced that his beloved son had been devoured by a wild beast. Neftali, standing among his brothers, watched his father weep inconsolably. A pang of guilt ignited in his chest, an invisible weight that, he knew at that moment, would not fade with time. That night, while the others indulged in a silent celebration, satisfied that they had rid themselves of Joseph, Neftali could not share their relief. Unable to silence his unease, he wandered away from the camp. His steps led him to a hill, where the starry sky stretched out as a silent witness, to what had happened. There, under the vastness of the firmament, his soul filled with questions. For the first time, an internal struggle began to tear him apart. "Is this what we are?" he whispered, his gaze lost in the immensity of the night. "Brothers who betray each other. Is this what it means to be the people of the covenant?" His father's words about divine purpose echoed in his mind. He wondered if that betrayal could somehow be aligned with God's will. Guilt consumed him, but at the same time he began to see his family's reality with clarity. Joseph was not the sole cause of the conflict. The seed of discord had been sown over the years, nurtured by Jacob's favoritism, by accumulated resentment, by a history of unhealed wounds. From that night on, Neftali changed. He was young, but in his heart, a deeper sense of loyalty and justice was born. Though he could not undo what had been done, he promised himself that he would do his best to protect his family in the future. The betrayal of Joseph would be an indelible scar, but also a lesson. Because even in the midst of the worst family crisis, there is always a path to redemption. Years passed, and the land of Canaan was overtaken by an unrelenting shadow famine. What was once fertile soil turned into a dry and barren landscape, incapable of sustaining either the flocks or the families that depended on it. Jacob, now an old man, watched with anguish as their provisions dwindled day by day. One morning, with a voice heavy with urgency, he said to his sons, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Neftali, along with his brothers, set out on the long and exhausting journey to Egypt. As they traveled the dusty roads, a silent tension settled among them. No one mentioned Joseph, but his memory lingered as a shadow weighing upon them all. The guilt, buried for years, remained a silent burden on their hearts. When they arrived in Egypt, they were brought before the governor in charge of food distribution. The figure of the man before them, dressed in fine Egyptian robes and surrounded by servants, commanded respect. Instinctively, they bowed before him. But when the governor spoke, something in his voice made them glance at each other in confusion. There was something strangely familiar in that tone, in the way he observed them. Unbeknownst to them, they stood before their own brother Joseph, the very one they had sold as a slave years ago. Now before their eyes he wielded unimaginable power. Joseph recognized them instantly, but he did not reveal himself. Instead, he looked at them sternly and accused them of being spies. Neftali felt a knot in his stomach as the powerful governor demanded proof of their honesty. He insisted that they bring Benjamin, the youngest brother, who had remained behind with Jacob. The return to Canaan was bitter. They told their father what had happened, and though Jacob resisted with all his being, refusing to let Benjamin go, hunger and necessity proved stronger than his fear. At last, with a broken heart, he allowed his youngest son to travel with them. On that second journey to Egypt, Neftali could not suppress the mix of fear and hope within him. Something deep inside whispered that this journey would change the fate of their family forever. And so it did. When they appeared before Joseph once again, they were subjected to a series of trials that pushed them to their limits. The powerful governor seemed determined to test their character, to measure their loyalty to Benjamin. Fate, which had once separated them through betrayal, now tested them with the opportunity for redemption. For in God's design, even the deepest family wounds can be transformed into paths of reconciliation. Neftali, always observant, noticed something peculiar in the governor's gaze. It was not just anger, not just authority. There was something more, something burning deep within his soul, something personal. And then the unthinkable happened. In a moment charged with emotion, Joseph could no longer contain himself. His eyes filled with tears, and with a voice trembling, yet firm, he spoke the words that would change their fate forever. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." The impact of those words struck Neftali and the others like a bolt of lightning in a storm. Time seemed to freeze. The air grew heavy. Their minds struggled to grasp the impossible. Joseph was alive. And not just alive, but standing before them, powerful, holding their destiny in his hands. Neftali felt his legs tremble. His mind immediately transported him back to the past, the dark pit, the blood-stained tunic, the heartbreaking cries of his father when he believed he had lost his beloved son. And now Joseph was there, standing before him. But what happened next left him speechless. Instead of vengeance, Joseph extended grace. "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here," he said calmly, "for God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." Those words pierced Neftali's heart. He had expected anger, reproach, perhaps even punishment. But what he received was forgiveness, undeserved forgiveness, a mercy that defied all human logic. It was then that he understood something his father Jacob had always tried to teach them. God's plans transcend human mistakes. What they had done out of envy and resentment, God had transformed into an act of redemption, not just for their family, but for many nations. The reunion with Joseph marked a turning point in Neftali's life. For years he had carried the weight of guilt, wondering if he would ever find redemption for his silence on that fateful day in Dothan. But now he saw Joseph not just as a brother, but as a living testament to the power of divine providence. This strengthened his faith. It compelled him to live with a greater purpose, to align his life with justice and reconciliation. On the journey back to Canaan to bring Jacob and the rest of the family to Egypt, Neftali reflected deeply on everything that had transpired. He understood that forgiveness was not a sign of weakness, but of a strength that could only come from God. He remembered Jacob's words, "In our trials, we discover who we are." And now, after this trial, Neftali knew that true strength did not lie in speed or cunning, but in the ability to love and forgive. When the day came for the entire family to reunite in Egypt, Neftali witnessed the moment that sealed a cycle of pain and redemption. Jacob, his eyes filled with tears, embraced Joseph as if trying to recover the lost years in a single instant. "Now I can die," Jacob whispered, "for I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." In that moment, Neftali felt something new: relief, as if a wound that had remained open for years was finally beginning to heal. The days in Egypt brought rest and prosperity for Jacob's family. Under Joseph's protection and Pharaoh's generosity, they found refuge after years of uncertainty and famine. But time, relentless, does not stop even for the greatest of patriarchs. Jacob, now old and frail, felt that his hour was near. His desire was clear: to bless his sons, not just as a farewell, but as an act of spiritual transcendence. Every word he spoke would be more than a message. It would be a prophecy, a divine seal upon the destiny of each one and the tribes that would come from them. Neftali waited for his turn. He was not among the first to receive his father's blessing, but when the moment arrived, he knew those words would mark his life forever. Neftali, always observant, noticed something unusual in the governor's demeanor toward them. It was not just anger or distrust. There was a deeper emotion, something tinged with a personal bond. Finally, the moment came. Joseph could no longer contain himself. With his voice breaking from emotion and his face bathed in tears, he revealed himself to his brothers. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." The words fell upon Neftali and the others like thunder. Time seemed to stop. Joseph was alive. And not only that, he was now a powerful man, holding the power to determine their fate, whether to condemn them or forgive them. Neftali took a step back, his mind flooded with memories: the pit, the blood-stained tunic, Jacob's heartbreaking cries when he believed his son was dead. Guilt pounded in his chest. But what happened next left him speechless. Instead of vengeance, Joseph offered them grace. "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me," he said. "God sent me ahead of you to preserve life." His words pierced Neftali's heart. He had expected reproach, punishment, perhaps a reckoning. But what he found was undeserved forgiveness, a mercy that defied all human logic. In that instant, Neftali understood something his father Jacob had always taught them: God's plan is greater than man's mistakes. What they had done out of envy and hatred, God had transformed into an act of redemption, not only to save their family, but entire nations. The reunion with Joseph marked a turning point in Neftali's life. For years he had carried the guilt of his silence that day in Dothan. Now he saw Joseph not just as his brother, but as an instrument of divine purpose. That realization strengthened his faith and gave him a new purpose to live with justice and reconciliation. As they journeyed back to Canaan to bring Jacob and the entire family to Egypt, Neftali reflected on everything that had happened. For the first time, he understood that forgiveness was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. He recalled Jacob's words, "In our trials, we learn who we are." For Neftali, this trial had shown him that true strength was not in speed or cunning, but in the ability to love and forgive. On the day the family reunited in Egypt, Neftali watched as Jacob embraced Joseph with tears in his eyes. "Now I can die," Jacob said, "for I have seen your face and know that you are still alive." Neftali felt as if a wound, open for years, had finally begun to heal. The days in Egypt brought relief and prosperity for Jacob's family. There, under Joseph's protection and Pharaoh's generosity, they found refuge in stark contrast to the hardships they had endured in Canaan. But time does not stop, not even for the greatest patriarchs. Jacob, now old and frail, felt that his end was near, and he had one final desire to bless his sons, not just as a farewell, but as a prophetic act, a declaration that would mark the destiny of each one and the tribes that would come from them. Neftali was among the last to receive his blessing. In that moment, he understood that his father's words would be more than a legacy. They would be the echo of a greater purpose, one that would transcend generations. As Jacob called his sons one by one, Neftali watched closely. Every word his father spoke not only described his brothers, but also determined their fate. Reuben, the firstborn, was reprimanded for his instability. Simeon and Levi were chastised for their violence. Judah was recognized for his leadership, while Joseph was exalted for his resilience and faithfulness. Neftali, waiting for his turn, felt a deep restlessness. What words would be reserved for him? How did his father see him? What destiny would be revealed? Finally, Jacob lifted his gaze, and his eyes, still filled with the wisdom of the years, rested upon him. His body was frail, but his spirit remained firm. With a slow and solemn voice, he pronounced the blessing that would be engraved in Neftali's memory forever. "Neftali is a doe set free. He speaks beautiful words." A silence full of meaning enveloped the room. Neftali bowed his head in respect while his brothers exchanged glances, trying to decipher the depth of those words. At first, the metaphor seemed enigmatic, almost simple, but the more he repeated it in his mind, the deeper its meaning became. The image of the doe evoked grace, speed, and freedom. It spoke not only of physical skill, but also of an innate ability to move with agility through life's challenges. And the beautiful words, Those words suggested that his legacy would not only reside in action, but also in inspiration, in words that would heal hearts and ignite hope. Jacob did not speak at random. His blessing was prophetic. Years later, Neftali would see how his tribe settled in fertile lands, full of beauty and prosperity, a place where great messages would resound. The promise of the beautiful words would come to life. That night, after the blessing ceremony, Neftali withdrew from the camp. Under the starry sky, he let his father's words resonate in his soul. "A doe set free," he whispered, gazing at the hills rising in the distance. "What does it truly mean to be free? Is it merely running unbound, or is there something deeper?" Then he understood that true freedom was not just a physical state, but a spiritual one. His life had been marked by family conflicts, silences that allowed mistakes, but also by moments of redemption and forgiveness. And now he realized that his purpose would not be limited to the speed with which he ran, but to the way he would inspire others to find their path amid adversity. He thought about the beautiful words and the power of speech. He remembered how Joseph's words, full of grace and forgiveness, had restored a broken family. He recalled his father's words, which had shaped his character over the years. And with a renewed sense of purpose, Neftali knew that his destiny was not only to run with freedom, but to speak with wisdom, bringing hope to those around him. Neftali committed in his heart to use his words to build, not to destroy, to reconcile, not to divide. He understood that his legacy would not be measured only by the swiftness of his feet, but by the wisdom and grace of his words. In the years to come, the tribe of Neftali would become a symbol of freedom and beauty in Israel. Their territory, located in the north, would include regions such as Galilee, which in the future would be known as the land where Jesus would begin his ministry. The light that would shine in that region would fulfill Isaiah's prophecy. "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light," Isaiah 9:2. Though Neftali would not live to see his blessing fulfilled, his destiny would be intertwined with God's divine plan of redemption for the world. That night, while the camp rested, Neftali lifted his eyes to the sky and, in silence, made a vow. He would be worthy of his father's words. He would fight for freedom, not only his own, but that of all those around him. He would use his voice to bring words of hope, love, and reconciliation to those in need. The arrival in the Promised Land marked a new beginning for the 12 tribes of Israel. After years of wandering in the desert, facing trials and battles, the time had finally come to settle in the land that God had promised their ancestors. Joshua, the leader appointed by God after Moses' death, presided over the distribution of the lands among the tribes, ensuring that each received its inheritance. For the tribe of Neftali, this moment was momentous. The territory assigned to them was located in the far north of Israel, a mountainous region rich in natural resources. According to the book of Joshua, their land stretched from the hills to the fertile valleys, including the majestic Sea of Galilee, also known as the Lake of Gennesaret. That land was a blessing, but also a challenge. The mountains surrounding the region offered imposing views and natural protection against enemies. In the valleys, the fertile soil produced a great variety of crops, while the forests provided wood and shelter for hunting. The Sea of Galilee, with its crystal clear waters and abundant fish, was a constant source of sustenance. This lake not only supported the lives of the inhabitants, but would also become a hub of commerce and culture in the centuries to come. Several streams and rivers also flowed through the region, ensuring fresh water for agriculture and livestock. However, along with blessings came challenges. The highlands of Naphtali were inhabited by Canaanite tribes that had not been completely driven out during the conquest. These peoples posed not only a military threat, but also a spiritual temptation. as their idolatrous practices endangered Israel's faithfulness. The settlement of the tribe of Naphtali in its territory was neither immediate nor easy. Although Joshua and the Israelites had fought significant battles to take possession of the Promised Land, pockets of resistance remained. The Canaanites who stayed in the region fiercely defended their fortified cities and religious practices. One of the greatest challenges for Naphtali was maintaining faithfulness to God while facing these external influences. The Canaanite cities, with their temples and altars dedicated to pagan deities such as Baal and Asherah, represented a constant spiritual danger. The struggle was not only military, but also a battle for the soul of the tribe, a test of their commitment to God's covenant. Despite these challenges, the tribe of Naphtali proved to be resilient. They remembered Jacob's words, describing them as a doe set free. That agility and adaptability were evident in their ability to thrive even amid adversity. Though they faced obstacles, their faith and determination kept them steadfast. In future generations, this tribe would witness great events. In their land, Jesus would walk, preach, and call his first disciples. Jacob's words would be fulfilled in an even deeper sense. Naphtali would not only be a strong and free tribe, but also a beacon of hope and redemption for the world. Naphtali and their descendants worked tirelessly to build villages, cultivate the land, and establish a trade network around the Sea of Galilee. Over the years, their tribe became a vital force within Israel. Their territory, favored by its location and resources, not only prospered economically, but also became a melting pot of culture and tradition. The routes crossing their mountains connected Naphtali with the rest of the tribes, making them a key link within the Kingdom of Israel. However, Naphtali's history was not without challenges. There were times when they failed to completely drive out the Canaanites and were forced to coexist with them, sometimes in harmony, other times under the threat of being drawn into their idolatrous practices. This struggle between faithfulness to God and the influence of their surroundings reflected the constant conflict that Israel faced throughout the centuries. But in moments of greatest danger, the tribe of Naphtali rose with courage. In the book of Judges, their crucial role is highlighted in the battle led by Deborah and Barak, when the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun joined forces to defeat Jabin, the king of Canaan, and his powerful commander Sisera. It was a victory that secured Israel's freedom and solidified Naphtali's reputation as a brave and strategic tribe. Their land, blessed with abundance, was not only a divine gift but also a great responsibility. Like the doe set free in Jacob's blessing, the tribe of Naphtali flourished in a land where freedom was part of their identity. The beautiful words that Jacob prophesied also manifested in their impact on Israel's history, not only through swords and military strategies, but also through their influence as a people who reflected God's light in times of darkness. For them, the true battle was not only against their external enemies, but against the temptation to stray from the path of the Lord. Over time, Naphtali became a symbol of resilience and determination. Its location in the north of Israel, with its towering mountains and fertile valleys, granted it a strategic position both in daily life and military conflicts. But what truly defined the tribe of Naphtali was its resilient spirit and its willingness to fight for the freedom of God's people. One of the most emblematic moments in its history is found in the book of Judges. For 20 years, Israel suffered under the cruel oppression of Jabin, king of Canaan, whose commander, Sisera, ruled with an invincible army of 900 iron chariots. In this time of despair, God raised up Deborah, a prophetess and judge of Israel, who called upon Barak from the tribe of Naphtali to lead the resistance. Initially, Barak showed doubt and fear, but in the end, he demonstrated great courage. Alongside Deborah, he gathered an army of 10,000 men, primarily from Naphtali and Zebulun. Trusting in God's guidance, they marched toward Mount Tabor, ready to face an enemy that seemed unbeatable. Then God intervened. He unleashed a storm that caused the Kishon River to overflow, flooding Sisera's chariots and throwing his troops into chaos. At that moment, the men of Naphtali descended with the agility of the doe, pursuing and annihilating the Canaanite army. The victory was complete, and the people of Israel were freed from oppression for 40 years. This triumph not only secured Israel's independence, but also reaffirmed Naphtali's role as a tribe of brave warriors, ready to fight for justice and freedom. Their willingness to act in critical moments, their faithfulness to Deborah's prophetic words, and their ability to face adversity made them a living legacy within Israel's history. Throughout the centuries, the tribe of Neftali continued to play a key role in the divine narrative. Their land would witness crucial moments in the history of redemption. For centuries later, it would be in the region of Galilee, within the land of Naphtali, where the light of the Messiah would shine most brightly. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Isaiah 9:2. Without knowing it, Naphtali and its descendants were part of a much greater plan. What began as a prophetic blessing became a reality that transcended generations, fulfilled in a way that only God could have orchestrated. Throughout Israel's history, the tribe of Naphtali remained a bastion of bravery and determination in the struggle for the land and identity of God's people. Its strategic location in the north of Israel placed it on the front lines of defense against foreign invaders, forcing it to maintain constant military readiness and cultivate an unbreakable spirit. During the era of the kings of Israel, Naphtali proved to be a key center of resistance. Despite internal divisions and external threats, the tribe stood firm, trusting in God's guidance. Throughout the Chronicles, their region would be recognized as a place where the light of God would shine intensely, fulfilling Isaiah's prophecy. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has dawned. Isaiah 9:2. Centuries later, this prophecy would be fulfilled with the coming of Jesus, who would carry out much of his ministry in Galilee, the land of Naphtali. But the legacy of Naphtali was not limited to its military feats or the richness of its land. Above all, it represented a testimony to the freedom that God grants his people. The image of the freed doe symbolized not only agility and grace, but also the ability to move without restrictions, to overcome obstacles with divine help, and to inspire others to seek true freedom in God. Men like Barak, a leader of the tribe of Naphtali, were not only war heroes but also examples of obedience and trust in divine plans. Even when the odds were against them, their story challenges us to ask, how do we face the challenges in our lives? Just as Barak needed Deborah's encouragement and God's guidance to lead a decisive battle, we too need the support of others and divine direction to overcome our own trials. However, the story of Naphtali is also marked by moments of fragility. During the time of the Judges, when Israel went through cycles of faithfulness and idolatry, the tribe of Naphtali was no exception. By failing to completely expel the Canaanites from their territory, they were exposed to the influence of their religious practices. Little by little, the worship of Baal and Asherah infiltrated their daily lives, drawing them away from their covenant with God. The unity that had once defined the tribe began to fragment. Without strong leadership committed to God's law, Naphtali struggled to maintain its identity and resist the cultural pressure of neighboring peoples. Its hills, once symbols of freedom, became filled with pagan altars. Naphtali's struggle was not only against external invaders, but also an internal battle for faithfulness to the Lord. In addition to spiritual dangers, Naphtali's geographical position made it vulnerable to constant foreign invasions. From the Arameans to the Midianites, many peoples saw their land as a strategic target. These incursions threatened not only the physical safety of the tribe, but also their faith. In every crisis, Naphtali faced the same decision: to hold fast to God's promise or to give in to the pressure of their enemies. And despite their failures, Naphtali showed resilience. In times of danger, they returned to God and found in Him the strength to rise again. Their story is a powerful reminder that although we may stumble, God is always willing to restore those who seek His face. The legacy of Naphtali challenges us today. It reminds us that freedom is not merely the absence of chains, but the ability to live within God's will. It teaches us that even when circumstances seem discouraging, faith and courage can transform any situation. Just as the light shone in Galilee, in the land of Naphtali, it can also shine in our lives if we choose to walk in truth and faithfulness to God. With each defeat, the tribe of Naphtali faced a crossroads: to remain faithful to their covenant with God or to yield to the influence of their conquerors. One of their darkest moments came with the oppression of the Midianites, who devastated the region, plundered the fields, and left the people in hunger and despair. As suffering increased, the people's cries to God grew weaker. Hopelessness settled in their hearts, bringing with it the temptation to seek solutions in foreign gods. But idolatry was not just a spiritual betrayal, it was a cancer that eroded the tribe's unity and strength. Every time the people turned away from God, they also lost their ability to resist, falling into a cycle of defeat and enslavement. Yet the light of faith was never entirely extinguished. Among those who succumbed, there was always a faithful remnant, those who, despite adversity, maintained their devotion to the God of Israel. They were the seed of restoration, the ones who remembered that true freedom was not found in the empty promises of idolatry, but in returning to God's path. The story of Naphtali is a story of failures, yes, but also of restoration. When the people strayed, God in His infinite mercy raised up judges to lead them back to Him. The tribe of Naphtali learned that their survival did not depend on their own strength, but on their obedience and trust in the Lord. Through the turbulent times of the judges, Naphtali witnessed the power of divine faithfulness. Despite their failures, God did not abandon them. Generations passed, and the tribe of Naphtali endured, emerging as a living testimony of God's patience and love. Though their past was marked by idolatry and weakness, their future still held a glorious destiny for their land. The hills and valleys of Galilee, home to Naphtali and Zebulun, were marked by the prophets as a place of redemption. In a time of darkness and oppression, the voice of Isaiah resounded with a heavenly promise. But there will be no more gloom for her who was in anguish. In the past, He humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, He will honor the way of the sea, the region beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has dawned. Isaiah 9:2. Those words announced more than just a territorial restoration. They proclaimed a spiritual revival that would transform the course of human history. For centuries, the land of Naphtali was considered a marginal place, distant from the religious center of Jerusalem, and marked by the influence of other nations. But according to prophecy, it was there that the light of God would shine most intensely. Centuries later, in perfect fulfillment of this prophecy, the region of Galilee became the setting for the earthly ministry of Jesus. It was there, in the land of Naphtali, that the Messiah called His first disciples, walked along the Sea of Galilee, and proclaimed the words of eternal life that would change the course of humanity. The tribe of Naphtali, which in its history had known the pain of oppression and the shadows of idolatry, saw the greatest promise fulfilled, the coming of the true light, Jesus Christ. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, God always has a plan of redemption and restoration for His people. The connection between Naphtali and the ministry of Jesus is no coincidence. The very land that had witnessed centuries of invasions, suffering, and oppression was now the stage where the light of God shone with the greatest intensity. Along those same dusty roads, where generations of the tribe of Neftali had walked in times of war and tribulation, now walked the Son of God, bringing healing, hope, and redemption. Jesus preached in their synagogues, healed the sick, and proclaimed the kingdom of God in this region, fulfilling with precision the ancient prophecy of Isaiah. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has dawned. Isaiah 9:2. The inhabitants of Naphtali, a mixture of Jews and Gentiles, became witnesses to the miracles that confirmed the arrival of the Messiah. The region, once marked by idolatry and oppression, was now transformed into a living symbol of divine restoration. God, in His infinite wisdom, chose Naphtali not only as a geographical territory, but as a prophetic testimony that no story is doomed to failure. What was once a land of conflict and conquest now stood as the epicenter of true freedom, the freedom from sin, reconciliation with God, and the fulfillment of the messianic promise. This transformation did not only change the history of Galilee, but also established Naphtali's legacy as an eternal symbol of hope. Just as in the past, the tribe had fought for its freedom, now its land announced the freedom that only Christ could grant. The story of Naphtali reminds us that even in the darkest moments, God does not abandon His people. He turns weakness into strength, failure into testimony, and darkness into light. The prophecy of Isaiah and its fulfillment in Jesus are an invitation to believe that God's grace not only restores territories, but also hearts and destinies. Naphtali teaches us that every story can be redeemed, every life can be transformed, and every person can become a channel of God's glory. The same land that witnessed battles and exiles was now a witness to divine love and mercy. From his origin as the sixth son of Jacob, born to Bilhah, Rachel's servant, to his crucial role in messianic history, Naphtali left an indelible mark on the people of God. His name, meaning my struggle, was not only a reflection of his family history, but also a foreshadowing of the challenges and victories that would shape the destiny of his tribe. Throughout the centuries, the descendants of Naphtali proved to be agile and courageous, a people of warriors and strategists. From their participation in the battles for the Promised Land to their heroic role in the victory of Deborah and Barak against Sisera, the tribe became a symbol of resilience and determination. However, not everything was glory. There were times of spiritual decline when idolatry and the influence of neighboring peoples weakened their identity. But God, in His faithfulness, never allowed the light of Naphtali to be completely extinguished. There was always a remnant willing to return to the covenant, a group of faithful ones who kept the promise of redemption alive. And so, centuries later, when it seemed that their story had been forgotten, God's grace was once again manifested in their land. Galilee, the territory of Naphtali, became the central stage for the ministry of Jesus, marking the most glorious moment of their legacy. Naphtali leaves us with a powerful lesson. No matter how dark our story has been, in the hands of God there is always a greater purpose. For where there was oppression, He brings freedom. Where there was darkness, He ignites His light. And where there was battle, He proclaims victory. Galilee, the land of Naphtali, witnessed something extraordinary. There, where generations before had fought and suffered under the yoke of oppression, the Messiah proclaimed the gospel, healed the sick, and ignited hope in the hearts of the marginalized. On that very soil, marked by the scars of history, the divine light shone brightly, fulfilling prophecy and sealing Naphtali as an eternal symbol of redemption. Throughout the Bible, the tribe of Naphtali embodies values that transcend time and continue to resonate in the life of every believer. First, speed and agility. From Jacob's words comparing him to a free doe to his ability to excel in battle, Naphtali represents quick action, bravery, and determination. But beyond the physical aspect, this quality has a profound spiritual meaning: the willingness to respond to God's call without delay, to move swiftly toward His purpose. Second, freedom. The image of the doe evokes more than speed. It is a symbol of independence, of breaking chains. The tribe of Naphtali fought tirelessly for Israel's freedom, and centuries later, its territory became the setting where the greatest freedom of all was proclaimed, the one that only Christ can offer: the freedom from sin and reconciliation with God. Third, the power of words. Jacob prophesied that Naphtali would speak beautiful words. It is no coincidence that Galilee, the land of Naphtali, was the place where Jesus spoke the most transformative words in history, teachings that continue to resonate in the hearts of millions to this day. The story of Naphtali is not just a tale of the past. It leaves us with valuable lessons for our lives today. God transforms struggles into purpose. The meaning of Naphtali's name, my struggle, reminds us that every challenge we face can be the ground where God shapes our character and prepares us for something greater. True freedom is found only in God. Naphtali fought for military and territorial freedom, but his greatest legacy was being the stage where true freedom was proclaimed, the one that can only be attained through a relationship with Christ. Words have power. Jacob's blessing invites us to reflect on the impact of what we say. Just as Naphtali was called to proclaim beautiful words, we too are called to use our words to heal, build up, and bring hope to others. God never abandons His plan. Despite the failures and downfalls of the tribe of Naphtali, the Lord remained faithful. He did not allow their story to end in defeat, but used it to fulfill His eternal purpose. This reminds us that even in our darkest moments, God is still at work, guiding us toward the fulfillment of His will. The story of Naphtali is an invitation to live with purpose, to recognize that every struggle, every trial, and every moment of uncertainty can be the prelude to a great victory in God's hands. Just as Naphtali was called to be a symbol of freedom and hope, each of us is called to reflect the light of Christ in our lives and our communities. His story teaches us that even when we face difficult moments, there is always a divine purpose waiting to be fulfilled. From his birth amid family conflict to his role in messianic history, Naphtali is a living testimony that God transforms struggles into freedom, weaknesses into strength, and words into inspiration. The territory of Naphtali, once marked by invasions and oppression, became the stage for the greatest light to ever shine: the ministry of Jesus. That legacy does not belong to just one tribe or one region. It belongs to all who choose to walk in the freedom and hope that Christ offers. Now I invite you to reflect. What are your struggles? And how can you allow God to turn them into victories? How can you bring words of grace and hope to those around you? If this story resonated with you and you believe it can inspire others, join this mission of sharing truth and hope. Subscribe to continue exploring the riches of God's Word and its impact on our lives. Comment below which part of Naphtali's story impacted you the most, or how you plan to apply its lessons in your life. I look forward to reading your reflections. Share this video with friends and family so they too can discover the powerful legacy of Naphtali and how it connects us to God's redemptive plan. Remember, Every story in the Bible invites us to reflect, learn, and grow. See you in the next video. May God bless you.